Okay, so
Thank you.
I have over 30 paintings here, and my focus is on light and color and how it affects different things, landscapes or still life, but I'm going to show you mostly landscapes throughout the day and different seasons and different weather conditions. So the first group is a grouping of paintings by the water. I do a lot with the water because I live near the American River and I like that particular subject. So you can see here that I don't know if can you see the color that this is a white sail, but it's not white because anything with light hitting it, sunlight hitting it, is going to have a slight bit of warmth. In the shadow, it's cooler. In the sunlight, it's warmer. You can see the arrow, right?
Yes.
All right. And then as things recede, and this was late day, so as things recede, these are green trees in the distance. You tend to lose the yellow out of the green and it turns cooler. So the greens will come forward. There's not much green in this particular painting. It's a little bit of greens in here, but mostly you lose the greens in the distance. And the focus is on obviously the sail, the people, and the reflections in the water. This one's just a simple figure in the water. And you can see how underneath, when I paint water, I paint first the color quality of the light. So the first stage of this painting was warm colors. There was some, you can see the yellow color underneath here. And it was probably pink underneath here, deep pink, because the color of light is warmer to start with. And then I layer in the paint. And this is all oil paint. And I layer in the paint on top of that. So these are the cool colors.
Do you paint that transparently or do you cover up the warm?
It's you mean the warmth on the bottom?
Do you let that warmth come through, or does it
warmth come through? I layer it, but it's not necessarily transparent paint. So it may be an opaque paint, but I layer it through. I paint in layers often, especially with colors in the water. I paint in layers.
And that warm comes through a cool color with the oil
Yeah,
paint?
if you layer the blue, in this case, the blues and greens on top of it and the violets, if you layer it so that you're not killing or over painting, the undercolor comes through. Yeah, that's a critical part of painting the sunlight in water. And here's another one. You can see how there's deep violets underneath here, deep pinks and violets, and then here's more of the yellows.
Yeah.
Okay, this is early in the morning, and this was a much lighter atmosphere. So you can see, is this cut off? Can you see the painting?
No, I can see that.
You can see the whole painting?
I think so.
Yeah, we see the boat.
We see the whole boat. Okay, because I only see part of it here. Okay, so here you have reflections of trees in the distance, and you can see the varying colors and how they're layered, the cool colors and warm colors. You can see the warmth underneath here. There's oranges and light yellows and orangey colors. It's early morning, and the sunlight hitting the figures, full sunlight, and then deep shadow. And then, of course, their reflection. So light things like this, where the light's hitting it and it's bright, will reflect slightly darker in the water. And where if it's really dark, things reflect slightly lighter in the water. So the values are closer in the water and the contrast is greater on anything above the water, whether it's land or a boat.
So light reflects darker and shadow reflects light.
Okay, if it's something that's dark like this, it reflects lighter. If something is light and bright, it reflects slightly darker than it is. Okay. So in other words, you can see how this shadow underneath is lighter than the boat itself. And this is slightly darker and cooler. If you squint, you can see it slightly darker and cooler than the light on the boat.
Interesting.
Yeah, if you don't do that, often it'll look like a mirror or it won't look like a reflection.
It looks floaty.
What was that?
It looks sort of floaty,
Yeah,
like it's floating. Yeah.
right. So here's the same kind of thing where dark, if you squint, this is dark, it reflects a little lighter, light reflects a little darker than it is. So you see the contrast is greater on the land. And if you squint, you can see the contrast is closer together. It's not as contrasty. And then here you have the focal point is the figure. And that's sunlight coming from this side. You can see it in the hat, on the side of the body, and then everything's reflecting in the water. Things break up if it's moving. Okay, so this is more of a sunset landscape. And it's by the American River, close to where I live. And even in the sky, when the sky is in full sunlight and it's a bluish sky, although this is at sunset, so the sky was warmer, you can see it's blue here, it gradates down, but there's warmth underneath the blue. And then all the shadows turn cool. This shadow is obviously different than this shadow, which is different than this. You can see the violets in the shadow. I'm using a full spectrum of color. And the violets here, where this is bluer and this is much lighter and cooler. And then, of course, where the sunlight's hitting it, it's a warm, intense color at this time of day.
How do you not get, when you put the yellow, how do you not get green in your sky? Is that just through your layering or
Oh, I'm not blending it. If I would blend it, it would turn green. I'm layering.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay, so wow. This where you get a lot of shadows on a rock in sunlight. So this shows you the color of shadow. You see how it's darker and more violety here, and it turns around, it's a gray blue, and even here it's a brighter blue, and it's curving on the shape of the rock. And these shadows are coming from overhanging trees. And then the rock itself is a dull, warm color. If it's a duller color, I mix the colors. I don't layer it as much. If it's a brighter color, I'll layer it. So, and then these are the deeper reflections in the water, the shadows in this moving water as well. These are reflections from the rocks. You can see that. And you can see the distance here. The water here is very different as it's moving forward to back. It's very different. It's cooler. It's reflecting more of the sky. Where this, you're getting a lot of the sand and the reflection of the trees and the color of the sand underneath those rocks, because this is shallow water here, where it's deep water back here. This is in San Francisco. It's in Golden Gate Park. They have this, it's probably man-made, but it's a waterfall that's man-made, and I just thought it was really interesting. So these are boulders, and you can see where the sunlight is hitting the top. It's a white with a little yellow, and the water's coming over, spilling into the water here. And these boulders are a gray blue, gray violet, some gray green in it. Sunlight is coming from this side, so it's called rim lighting, and you have this bright yellow in the green tree up close. But that, whoops. So it's bright yellow where the sunlight's hitting up close. That bright yellow is less bright in the distance. So I'm trying to create atmosphere and distance, whereas you can see this moves back, this comes forward. You see that the trees back here move back, this comes forward. There's not a lot of depth here, but there's enough to show that there's a difference between the front and the back. And then, of course, the water's reflecting, and you could see the rocks are reflecting. This one is a bunch of cut boulders where they did a lot of mining years ago. and in the 1800s, mining for gold. So they cut all these boulders, and it's right next to the water. And this is a warm gray. And you can see the cool, this is a cool violet gray, and then there's cool green grays, and this is reflecting the sky here. So it's this blue gray. See the difference between the sky reflection and this side is not the sky reflection. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this painting is in thirds. You have the third up here, the third down here of the rocks, and the third in the water. So here you have trees that are kind of organic, very simple shapes, some sky. This is all moving water, and this is all very structured. Okay, so the detail is in here. Nothing else is detailed. This painting was actually shown in New York City at the American Impressionist Society. It was a Salmagundi Club in New York City, an exhibit there.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
The rocks are awesome.
You can see here, you see how this is very light, and when you squint, you can see it's darker. It's still light, but it's darker here than it is here. Can you see the difference? So this is darker in the reflection than it is in the light and up in the rock itself.
And your shadows are warmer in the rock and cooler in the water.
Mm-hmm. Cooler in the water, cooler and a little darker in here. And the shadows go a little bit lighter. It's harder to see in this painting, but you can see that.
Beautiful.
This one I actually have right behind me.
I just saw that one.
And you can see here, these rocks are under the water, right? And then as you move back and the water gets deeper, you don't see any transparency in the water down here, but you do here. And then you have these big boulders, and you can see in these big boulders, I'm very interested in color and color differences. So these are all gray rocks, but this is gray green, gray violet, gray blue, a darker gray blue, a lighter gray blue. This is reflecting a little of the sky here. This is a warm gray in here. And then you have the reflection of the rocks in the water, but the sunlight's hitting it. So it's dark here in shadow, but it's warm here. And then as you move back, less and less detail, rocks back here, and less contrast and less description, less detail as it moves back. The rocks in the sunlight are warm, but they're dull. So that means I mix them more, a little less layering, more mixing.
On the palette.
Wherever it's dull, I'm going to mix more, layer less. So these are layered colors, but they're mixed together.
Gotcha.
Now, do you see over on this side? Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I don't see it. Okay. All right. So this is the same place, but I'm closer to the bridge, to the previous painting. So these are the rocks on the side where it's sunlit. It's reflecting down. This is again, it's a gray color, but there's a multitude of colors in it. I don't use any browns or blacks. The most earth color I'll use is a yellow ochre. So I'm using more spectral colors, and I'm mixing them to create dull gray colors rather than using a gray paint. You can see the gradation in the sky from bottom to top. The sky started with a light pale yellow, and I think it started with a pink underneath here. And it's gradated down.
And what time of day was this?
This was morning, but it's later morning. It's not super early.
Gotcha.
This is that same bridge, but this is a different season, and it's early morning. It's autumn, and it was cooler. So the colors are a lot cooler, and they're not as contrasty. And you're getting a lot of the reflection of the bridge and the reflection of the trees behind it. You can see the warmth underneath that sky.
Yeah.
So if I started with just a blue sky, it would feel cold. It would feel very cold. It wouldn't feel like a sunlit sky. So that's why I use the warmth underneath the cool colors. And
Is
even
there blue in that sky also that we're not seeing, or is it
blue.
all?
There's blue over, I think I started as yellow and then there's a little orange and then there's the blue over it, very light blue.
That's not what you were seeing when you were painting, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is what I was seeing. But you don't see the layers. You see it in relationship. Like I look at this compared to these warm colors. And in this painting, the lightest light is the sky. I always look for what's the lightest light, darkest dark. So here are some darks. I think these are the darkest darks. Usually the darkest darks are verticals in shadow the closest to you. So I wouldn't want to make something super dark back here because then I'm collapsing space. So I want to see, enough space and distance and atmosphere, and you can do that with color and value and texture and everything. So in other words, put the darkest darks up front and less texture, less contrast in the distance.
For me personally, I've been trying to paint in plein air, and that seeing a blue sky, you think, oh, blue sky, when there's really, it's warmer than you think, but you see this bright blue.
Right.
So
you have to compare it to, yeah. So what I do is I teach people how to compare it to other things in sunlight. So if you're looking at a blue sky and then you compare it to the grass and or the trees that are in sunlight or a structure in sunlight, how does it all differ? But look for the warm color. We know we can see blue, but you have to look for how does that warm color differ? So is it more pink or more yellow? Or if it's going to be orange, it's usually at sunrise or sunset. It's usually a light pale yellow or pale pink. As it goes higher in the sky, it's a deeper color. So I might have some like that, but we'll see as we get further.
When you're painting outside, do you use at some point, do you say, oh, this is the local color? Do you keep it to like the rocks or the something that is, I'm reluctant to say realistic colors, but where do you find that?
Okay, so in the first stage of a painting, I won't paint a lot of the so-called local color. I'll paint the color underneath. If it's warm, if it's in light, it's warm. If it's in shadow, it's cool. I look for differences of coolness, differences of light, and I get a relative value, darks to lights. Okay. In the second stage, I change that color and it may appear to have some of the local color. So like, for instance, there appears to be some green there. It started yellow, but then I did put some green on it. That's the local color. Okay. But not always. Like, for instance, this, I didn't end up just green. You can see a lot of blues in here and there's some violets down here. So I don't always add just the local color.
You're really looking for the color temperature of the light, not
of the light.
Okay.
And how does it compare to everything else? And you can take it into any style or subject matter because it's about light. Right. So this might show you a little bit better. This is early morning. Now, this is not sky. This is a distant hill. And this is called rim lighting as well. It's backlit so you can see the light around the trees here, and that's all very yellow. It's not green at all. And these trees in the back the local color is green, but because of the atmosphere and the light and it's across the river, it's much cooler. I didn't use any green there at all. And then
but you definitely say trees, right?
Say that again?
It's definitely trees. It's not like, oh, you didn't paint your trees, you made it a mountain or yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not describing it as trees, but you can sense it's trees. You can see some form down here, but they're not green. It's maybe a little green in those, but not much. But you do have some greens up close. So green usually is the greenest up close, not distant.
How do you do something if it's not like one of your other paintings was not, there wasn't a lot of distance, but some like in your waterfall, then is that just lessened a skosh, right?
Uh,
The,
yeah,
the dullness or the neutral color to make it go backwards.
yes, it's usually less bright, less contrast, less texture, less of everything as you recede in the distance. Okay. You don't want it to be equal value contrast or equal intensity of color or equal, because anything in the back, if it's the same, if I had a bright yellow back here, it would come right to the foreground, right? You know, this is up close, but
Right.
that has to stay back.
If
And
you
then
were trying to make something back there part of your center of interest, would you use a brighter color or just a little more contrast or something?
well, in this
I mean, you
painting,
wouldn't have the
I
green
wouldn't
back
put,
there.
yeah, I wouldn't put a center of interest back here in this painting.
No.
If, for instance, I wanted to put a boat here, I can make that the
Right.
center of interest. You know, but it would have to be, you'd have it,
Yeah.
you know, coming down here, maybe.
Right. No, I was just wondering, you know, sometimes there's two center of interests or a pull back to a different spot on the canvas. I mean, it could be a little, just a change of
Yeah,
color. I
there's
guess.
usually a primary and maybe a secondary one.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing about this too is you see this color here is very different than the color in the distance. They're both cool and similar in value. Every plane change is a color change. And that's something to remember, because if you want to create form or atmosphere or distance, every plane shift is a color shift.
Are you talking about flat and
Yeah, this is a
vertical?
flat
Okay.
plane that's horizontal. This is not a
Right.
flat plane back here. This is not a flat plane. So you just want to look when you're painting that every plane shift is a color shift as well. Now this shows distance. So
Yeah.
this is one I could show you that the brightest, highest contrast is going to be up close. You see how the contrast is less here and certainly less back here. So more texture, more big strokes, smaller strokes back here, right? The
Right.
colors here are not as bright as the colors up here. Okay. So this shows not a lot of form, but a lot of distance and atmosphere. That's Hawaii.
I wish I was there.
Right. And this is autumn, and these are autumn trees reflecting in the water. So you can see light reflects darker. This is morning, and you can see the layers. This is sky, this is distant hill, those are trees behind, and you can see there's not a lot of green in those trees, right? And this is the wind on the water, which is reflecting the sky high up, which is bluer. So you're getting blue reflection here. This, towards the horizon, gets warmer. When you're way high, in this case, it was bluer and reflecting in the water.
And you don't use a cobalt blue, you use.
Yeah, I use
cerulean?
marine and cerulean or manganese. They're similar.
Oh, wow.
This is sort of it is overcast and atmosphere. It's moody, it's foggy in the distance. It's not a sunny day. The colors are not going to be as contrasty or as bright, although you do have a little bit of bright up here. And you can see the little bits, how the little bits of water go back. The most water is over here. The design of this, you can see it's circular up here, and then this goes back with perspective. Trees in the distance, less detail, and these are way cooler and duller. Smaller too, of course.
That's a beautiful painting.
Thank you. So another overcast day. I think I'm going to show you a few here. Big dark clouds, right? Now, when I start painting, I look for large, simple masses, not detail. So you have a big color shape here, which is those dark clouds. You have this dark cloud. You have light coming through. And then you have the land and maybe this blue hill in the distance. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major big shapes. I usually try to get 7 or less large shapes to start with. And it's very simple, blocky to start with. Okay, no detail. The detail comes after I get the relationships of the big masses. So you can see this mask, if you squint, you can see it, is dark and cool, a blue-gray. This mass is also cool, but it's not as dark, right? This obviously is the lightest. These are accents that came later. And then this is dark land. The darkest thing when you're doing overcast days is in the land. Your clouds won't be the darkest. So this is dark, but this is darker.
Okay.
Okay. So all the small variations come later in the painting. So these overcast.
Take you to do these paintings.
It depends on which painting it is.
You do them plein air or at both?
Some start plein air and some are plein air, some start plein air and then I finish them indoors. Okay, this was too cold to do outside.
Yeah.
Up near Tahoe. And so you can see here, for instance, the snow, this is white with a touch of yellow to keep it warm in the sunlight. And the shadow areas are cool and they're blue grays. And then these are dark neutrally colors. There is some green up here and not much green back here. This is going towards Tahoe as well. And this shows atmosphere and distance. So you can see how these green trees are the same as these green trees, which are the same as these and the same as these back here. But you see how the color shifts as it goes back. And usually I start a lot of these with a brush, and then I finish with a palette knife. That's generally what I do. And then I might go in with a brush. Some are all knife, some are all brush, but the majority now are starting with a brush and then using a knife towards the end. This one's this big hill, and it was later in the day, but everything was a very soft light. So you can see the sunlight was hitting here. These are all shadows. And then it had these beautiful clouds. Reflection.
Your shadow and light are not huge value differences.
This particular painting. In this painting, they're not a huge value. They're just temperature difference.
Yeah.
Warm, cool.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to be greater, but this particular scene was it was softer light, even from here to here in the clouds. Value difference is minimal. And you can see that how the sky is very warm there, and it gets cooler as it goes up.
Yes.
And then the reflections, this is darker than anything in the water. Okay, but this is darker than this. So the dark reflects lighter, light reflects darker. This is a foggy day. This was in a museum show in the California Art Club museum exhibit a year ago, I think. And this is I think it's 18 by 24. So these are subtle value shifts and color shifts. So dark is dark, lightest light's up here. So dark is dark, and just look at the things in the water here. You could see this has more saturation And then as it moves back, it's less and less saturation and more of the colors in the sky kind of spilling over. Okay, this is a brighter saturation here, but you don't have that back here. More texture up here, less, not much back there. For a while, I did a lot of these boggy areas.
Marshy.
Swampy, boggy. I don't know. I really like them. I'm not doing them lately, but I did a lot of those for a while. Okay, so in this case, you can see more of the saturation of color and more of the texture here. And as they move back less and less, you can see that's warm, yellowy oranges. And then here you have a slight dull green, and then it goes to violets back here. And then the sky here is fairly bright, but not the clouds. This is a tree in the distance, but there's no green in that tree. Yeah. The blue is more saturated up here than anything here.
I love how this green in the front, even though it's not in the midground and back, it's not green. I was under the impression that it had to be more local color to make it, you say it's a green plant, but obviously not. I was wrong.
Yeah, well, but this may have been, it was kind of wintry kind of day, and so it may have been like dead grasses. I don't remember.
But I mean, your midground.
Oh, this
purple further in the purpley
this
foliage and the yes, I mean, in your head you say, oh, that's the same as what's in the foreground. It's just back further. I just am not seeing the color. And personally, when I'm painting, which is the wrong way, apparently, I put that green back there and it doesn't work. And I don't know why. Now I know why.
Yeah. Well, there's no right or wrong.
Thank you.
In my system, this is what I do. And this is in the lineage of the Impressionists who work with how does light affect the color. And so in that system, that's what I do. As a tonalist would do something different.
Well, I mean, when I'm looking at a painting that I'm doing, I didn't know what I was doing wrong, but looking at these, I'm like going, oh, I could kill some of that local color to make it have the depth.
Right.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. This is what was that?
Monet.
Yeah. Except it's not lily pads, it's algae on water. There's a pond near I live, and I would go there frequently. I did this a number of years ago, but I did this frequently. I would go there and paint this because it was just beautiful patterns of algae against the on the water and these reeds, and I just thought it was great. So this is a diptych. It's two different paintings, and so you can see how it's cool in the bottom of those reeds. It's not just a dark green. In the shadow, there was a cool kind of blue to it.
And then darker in the water.
Whoops. Yeah. And then so then you have, this is the actual water where it's blue and it is reflecting the sky. And then you can see all of the algae, how it's different. It's greener here, it's more yellowy pink here, and it's more pinky violet back here. And that's just the way the light was hitting it. Generally, it won't be very green in the distance. More texture up in here versus back here. This is another one of those ponds.
That's a painting. That looks like a photograph.
It's a painting. And actually that won a first place in some show in Southern California. So this is water. These are shadows, cast shadows from trees, right? And they're laying on top of the water. And then these are reflections of trees going into the water. So the cast shadows go over those reflections. This is land.
Oh,
right? So this is the land. These are cast shadows of trees that were back here somewhere. This is reflection from trees, and these are the cast shadows. And this is just the water reflecting the sky. And you can see how this transition from the warmer color here, it was like a yellowy, and that's kind of cooler. There's probably pink under that. And you could see the blue, and that's pinker up there. And even the difference of the shadow, the colors in the shadows, see that color versus this color. It switches as it moves back on that flat plane of water. And I'm on a hill looking down. Lots of texture here, not so much in here. Okay, this is another, they're almost abstract because they're kind of big shapes and they kind of look abstract, but you can see it's the side of the pond. This is reflecting trees. This is the algae. This is reflecting sky. And this is grasses in the foreground. Yellowy greens in the sunlight. Cooler blues and violets in the shadow with a bit of green, but the greens are not as, and the yellows are not as bright in the distance.
what is the yellow that is on your palette?
Cad lemon and a tad yellow. Medium, probably. And then I'll use a yellow ochre too.
Right.
So this is another scene of the pond. And okay, so it's a lot of light and shadow. So the sunlight's coming down here and it's going across here. So this is the sunlight on the hillside and the sunlight coming across the algae. Sunlight coming across the algae, and then the shadow. Shadow here, shadow coming across. Shadows here, shadow coming across, all the way across. And as it changes surfaces, the color shifts. So this is more blue. This is more of a kind of a, well, this is a darker green in here. And these are the yellows. And then you could see the pinks and violets here. The cast shadows on the land are all a different color than what you see in the cast shadows on the algae. This is kind of a complex painting. This is the sky reflecting.
Oh, fun.
This is another one that won some award, first place in something. Cast shadow of trees on the pond. I'm looking down. And so these are all the trees casting shadows. This is water, and this is, these are reflections of trees behind. Well, I guess here's a little bit of the land. Okay, and this is foreground and foreground foliage. You can see the color difference underneath the blues. There's this, this yellowy color and the pinks. We're back on land now. And so this is in Napa Valley. And you can see here's a lot of green in these trees, but these are all pine trees in the distance. And I don't think I use much green back here at all. This is where the sunlight was hitting those trees. And then you can see the bright yellowy green up front, long cast shadows. You can see the blue here and how it transitions up, and underneath that blue, there is the violet color. This is a flower farm. And so a bunch of daylilies, and then, okay, the water here coming over, and you can see the shadow is cool. The light hitting the water is warm. The warmth you could see underneath that coolness, right? Different warmth here. Autumn trees. Big, simple shapes. There's really no details painting. It's just, this is more high contrast and vibrant color. sunlight on an autumn day. And in these trees, this white is not pure white. Pure white is cold. So it's a cold color. So I add a little bit of warmth, a little touch of yellow or orange or red, a touch of it, just so that there's a little bit of warmth in that light. And then the shadow is cooler of these trees. And then you can see all these very warm trees. But even in here, there's deeper violets because those are the leaves in shadow. It's not bright orange back here. This is dark, kind of a dull red violet, where these are the brighter colors in here. And then there's some green layered in. Eucalyptus trees. Okay, same principle. This has a composition that turns around. See, it's a circle.
Yeah.
Gradated sky. Less detail back here, kind of just suggestions.
Did you use a palette knife when you were painting the leaves or a brush? Do you know?
Well, I usually start with a brush and then go to the knife. So you can see some of that's brush here, and some of this has the knife in it. And like here, you see these are the dark leaves. Those are in shadow. That's part of a tree in shadow, where these are more sunlit. Little bit of shadow in here. So I use both brush and knife.
Susan, are we seeing the bottom of the trees? I don't know. I mean, we can't see the ground. We don't see where the trees.
No, these don't have. Yeah, these are not in the ground. I mean, it's cut off before that, I believe. Let's make it a little smaller. Yeah.
So that is the whole painting.
Yeah,
it's about right.
When you're looking for your composition, instead of painting the top and the bottom of the tree, are you, how do you say, oh, this is going to be my composition? Do you use a little viewfinder, or do you just decide that it's just a better?
Yes. Yeah, usually I'll put the ground in, but for some reason I didn't in this one. But this gives you an idea of a close-up. So,
well, I have a hard time with all these, trying not to paint all these leaves. And I'm wondering, does that palette knife just sort of, it kind of scumbles? I work in watercolor, so this is a little foreign to me.
Yeah, well, you don't want to use palette knife with watercolor. It's not going to work.
No, no.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this thing to be the size. Oh, that's about right. Okay, so so what was your question about the palette knife?
It just gives a little different texture than a brush.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can get it very thick. You can get it very thin. You could scrape it. It's a very different texture. The brush texture, I mean, you can do a variety with the brush, but the knife has a different texture, and I can get the color more accurate. You can get the color very accurate with a knife, more so than a brush, because a brush, all the colors blend in the bristles, and it tends to dull out a little bit. I mean, you can do it. You just have to use multiple brushes, keep your brushes clean.
So all three of these last paintings are like waist up, or whatever you want to call it. You're not seeing the ground in this.
Right. Well, this one, you see the ground over here, but you don't see where it's coming out of.
Right, right. Okay.
There are rules that say, you should put the ground in, but there are times you can break the rules.
I like it. I like just seeing the tops of the trees. I think it's great.
This one I cropped the top too.
Right.
And this one, I think this is the last one. No, yeah, I think it's the last one. This one is up in Tahoe, and you can see there's a lot of atmosphere and distance. It was in the summer, but there was still snow because it was way up in the mountains. And so you can see the value change is minimal back here. These are close values, and they're cooler colors. They're not saturated, bright colors. They're muted, dulled out colors. And then up here, you have the contrast, the high contrast, the brighter colors. Here, there's a lot more detail, but it's not as detailed as you think it is. That's just a suggestion. I tend to suggest more than I describe things.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. There's description, which is like photorealism, and I don't do that. So I suggest enough. I like to say the most with the least amount of work. So I suggest it, and so your eye and your brain finishes it. And I can do a close-up of this so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's see. See, there's not a lot of detail. There's marks. There's a lot of marks there, but not a lot of detail. And that's the most detail in the whole painting. Both brush and knife.
Yeah, and your eye just reads it like.
Yeah, like it's like detail of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are just exquisite. I'm extremely impressed.
Oh, well, thank you. There is the end.
I'm impressed too, Susan. You've changed your colors since I last saw you, since we were painting. Seems like your colors are more muted and not as, I don't know, intense or something.
Well, but that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Depends what it is. If I'm doing a lot of fog or atmosphere, it won't be. But yes,
Right.
People change over time.
Right,
So
right. We
Probably
evolve.
depends on the subject matter
They're
too.
just beautiful, just gorgeous.
that's not bright. Yeah.
Do you
Just
paint just landscapes nowadays, or do you do florals or?
Lately, I've been doing mostly landscapes. For the last few years, I've been doing mostly landscapes. I mean, in the past, a lot of still life, but not currently. I keep thinking about going back to doing still lifes, but I really love the landscape. Part of what I love is the rhythm, the movement of landscape, the depth and atmosphere. I'm not as interested in getting the exact likeness of a tree or a place.
Right.
That doesn't interest me. But rhythm, movement, atmosphere, light, color, that's what interests me. Space.
Susan wants to know what palette knife company do you recommend, and the sizes do you use?
Okay, I use Art Express, and I'll get a knife and I'll show you. So it's about 2.5 inches long. I don't know if can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, the blade is 2.5 inches long.
Are they softer or harder than another one, or do you?
They're fairly flexible, but not over. It's not really stiff, and they're called Holbein is the brand. Holbein, okay. And I think the number is 2 X. MX or XS, and I think it's a 2 is the number. I haven't bought one. They last forever, so I haven't bought one in a long time. Because I usually just use this knife. I don't use multiple knives. I just use this knife.
There you go. Well, does anybody else have any more questions? Oh, Donna, you can get them at Art Express. Is the name of the company.
Artexpress.com. You can I've never found them in person. I've only found them online. Holbein.
Yeah, you could probably Google that. Dick Blick might carry them, or Cheap Joe's.
I don't think they do unless they started to, but artexpress.com is what carries them.
Oh, okay, all right, Art Express. I've never tried that one. And I'm gonna end this thing and